This didn't happen to me, but it happened to my mother, and she has told me the story a few times over the years. This happened when she was in college. She is turning 65 this year, so I guess it happened about 45 years ago. She was born and raised in Tennessee and went to college there. A small college in eastern Tennessee that at the time was even smaller than it is now. The area has grown since then, but back then it was a small town, and the outlying areas were mostly farms. One weekend, her and her best friend, they were sorority sisters, were invited to a party out at another friend's parents' farm. Her best friend's boyfriend offered to drive. So off they went. My mom, her friend Eileen, and her boyfriend at the time. We'll call him Jack. Since this was before GPS and cell phones, they got lost in the backcountry trying to find their friend's farm. As they turned down a dirty road, they were stopped after driving about a mile by a man standing in the middle of the road. He had no car that they could see, and was wearing what looked like a police officer's uniform. He approached the car and asked Jack to roll down the window, and proceeded to ask them what they were doing out there. Eileen, in the passenger seat, said they were looking for their friend's farm and must have taken a wrong turn. She then asked him if he knew where it was, and if he could point them in the right direction. His response was, "Turn the engine off and get out of the car." My mom, sitting in the back seat, noticed that his uniform was somewhat dirty. She said that it was a navy blue uniform, so from far away you couldn't tell, but as he was right next to her window, she could see that it had dirty stains on the shirt, and the pants themselves looked more like dark blue jeans instead of a police officer's pants. Jack asked the officer why they needed to get out of the car and said that they were just lost, and if they were trespassing that he'd be happy to turn the car around and go back the way they came. And he said, "I don't need you to argue with me. I need you to turn the engine off, and you and the ladies need to get out of the car." My mom leaned forward into Jack's ear and told him not to turn the car off. Eileen then pleaded with the officer that they were just looking for directions and they weren't causing any trouble. The officer then leaned down more into the vehicle and told her to stop talking, and looked at Jack again and told him to turn the car off. At this point, my mom said the tension was extremely high and she knew that something was very wrong. My mom whispered to Jack, "Just go." Jack became a little flustered and turned to look at my mom. That's when my mom said louder, "Jack, just go." At that point, the officer reached his arm into the vehicle and tried to grab the keys. Jack swatted his hand away and my mom screamed, "Eileen!" At that moment, Eileen grabbed the stick shift. Back then, they were located on the steering wheel, not in the middle panel, and threw the car into gear. Jack pressed the gas and the car jolted forward and the officer was pushed away from the vehicle. Here's where it gets really freaky. My mom then turned around to look through the back window as they were driving away, and she saw two other men, behind a thick set of bushes, with chains. They had metal chains in their hands and they were hiding. At this point, they were still freaking out, because they had no idea where the road was going. Would it dead end? Would there be more men ahead? Everyone in the car was hysterical at this point. Luckily for them, the dirt road met up with a paved road in a couple more miles. They went back to campus and filed a report with campus police. Nothing ever came of it. Their friends with the farm never heard anything else about the men. There were no other reports about the men, nothing. My mom said she would have almost been relieved to hear that they were escaped mental patients or criminals on the run. It would have been an answer. She said the most unsettling thing is that they just disappeared. To this day, she believes she would have disappeared too if they had gotten out of the car. A couple of years ago, when I was working the night shift, I was on my way to work around 12 a.m. when I was stopped at a streetlight. I was the only person on the road, so I was getting impatient, waiting for the light to change. As I was sitting there, I heard a knock on my passenger window. I looked over and there's this older gentleman, probably around 60 or so, just standing there. I roll down my window like an idiot and ask him, "Are you okay?" He just stands there. I think he's drunk, or maybe has something wrong with him, I ask him again. Still no answer. Finally he says, "Can you give me a ride?" Keep in mind that the light has already changed twice, so I should have gone already. But I was trying to being nice and I stayed there. I asked, "Where do you need me to take you?" The guy said just up the street not far from here. I said okay, but if it's farther, I have to drop you off because I'm going to be late for work. I said get in. Again, I was worried if he was drunk. I didn't want him getting hit or getting hurt some other way. The man got in, and as soon as I started to drive, I asked him his name and other small talk. He just sat there. Finally, he answered, "My name is Henry." I said, "Pleased to meet you, Henry. Are you sure you're okay? You really shouldn't be walking out at night in the road. You could get hit." Henry just sat there saying nothing. It was a cool night, but not freezing, and I noticed that Henry was shivering. I asked if he wanted me to turn the heat on. He said, "Yes, please." After about 10 minutes of driving, I asked Henry if we were getting close to his house because I had to get to work. He just sat there. Finally, he said, "Stop." So I stopped the car and he said, "We are here." I look around and there's nothing but fields on both sides. I asked him, "Here?" He said, "Yes, please." So he gets out and starts walking down the street. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? As I'm about to get out of my car to go see what he's doing, he stops in the middle of the road and just stands there. At this point, I'm getting worried and frustrated that I'm going to be late. So I just put my car in drive and slowly start to drive away. When I look in my mirror and I see Henry following me, I look down because I get a notice on my phone. When I look up again, Henry is gone. Now keep in mind, I only looked away for a couple of seconds. There's no way that a person could move that quick out of my sight. By this time I'm freaking out, so I speed up and get to work. When I get inside, I see one of my co-workers and he sees that I'm a little out of it. He asks, "What's wrong?" I tell him my story and he goes, "Oh, you seen him too?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, a bunch of people have seen that guy. He asks for a ride, and if you give him one, he will have you drive so far and stop and he'll get out. If you tell him no, he will follow your car, and when you look up in your mirror, he's gone." I'm like, maybe I'm dreaming or just tired. So when I'm driving home after work, it's in the morning and I'm coming up to where I dropped Henry off, and wouldn't you know it, in the far distance there is a small cemetery with around 10 headstones. Needless to say that I quickly drove home, and the next night I put in for a transfer to the day shift. So if you find yourself alone at night, stopped at a traffic light, take my advice and don't give anyone a ride. You just don't know who or what they really are. I live in a small town located in central Minnesota. Not much to do in terms of entertainment, so most of the time we made our own. It was late August, and me and a few friends were bored. We drove to the next town over to ghost hunt in this small backwoods cemetery. This cemetery is surrounded by cornfields on two sides and woods to the back. Maybe has 100 graves tops and isn't used anymore. It was a pretty uneventful night, so we decided to call it quits around 1 a.m. The only way in and out of the cemetery is this small dirt road that curves through the whole place. We get in my SUV and start to leave with no problems. About halfway to the entrance is a curve. As we go around, we see something strange ahead on the side or road. Thinking it was an animal, I throw my brights on and slow down. That was worst idea ever. We finally get a good look at this thing when it crawls across the road. Best way I can describe it is demonic. It was humanoid, but this sickly gray and blue color. The knees were bent the wrong way and its body looked broken. It stopped in the middle of the road and just stared at us for what seemed like forever, but was probably not even a full minute. The eyes are what really haunt me. It had these almost reflective, bright yellow eyes. As soon as it crossed the road, it disappeared. We flew out of that cemetery as fast as possible and never went back.
If you enjoy the video, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to support us, share it to your bestie.